Hey everyone, so I am finally back with a cosplay mistakes video, and this time I'm going to be talking to you about the very headache-inducing, expensive doozy that was Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku. Now, as most of you probably know, this costume was definitely a labor of love. I absolutely love Riku as a character. I have been a fan of Kingdom Hearts since the very first game, like many of you, so well over a decade. I've always wanted to cosplay something from Kingdom Hearts, but I just never really knew which costume I wanted to do. So when the third game started releasing promo images of the characters' new outfits, I saw Riku's and I immediately wanted to make this happen. So personally for me, I did not want to rush this costume. There are a lot of people out there who are so adamant about being first with cosplaying something that their costume definitely looks like they rushed it, but I wanted to take my time. I wanted to get really nice materials. I wanted everything to be as perfect as possible. But unfortunately, we all know that with cosplay, you could be a master seamstress and things still will not go the way you want them to. So a long time ago, before I actually started working on Riku, I did a fabric shopping vlog where I was picking out all of the fabrics. This is where I made my first mistake. The black I got for the jacket was this lightweight faux leather pleather by Han. It had a little bit of stretch to it, but I thought the look was really nice. I thought it would be nice and light because Texas gets so hot, and I had a coupon, so everything was going in the right direction until I started trying to use this fabric. So color me a little surprised when the black that I bought would not sew. So you could sew two pieces together with the right sides together. That was totally fine. However, you couldn't do any kind of decorative top stitching on it. Whether you used a Teflon foot or stabilizer or tissue paper, I tried all kinds of methods to be able to go over the top of this fabric and nothing worked. It bunched up, it warped, it just looked bad. So I had all of this black stretchy Han fabric and it was pretty much useless. I could not use it for this jacket. So I knew I needed to find something else. This took a long time because there are multiple fabric shops online that sell different types of black pleather, faux leather, things like that. So I ordered, I don't even want to know how many swatches I have sitting out in my stash of swatches. There are just tons. I needed something that did not have a crazy amount of texture. I needed something that was a nice black that wasn't too heavy because a lot of these are very stiff, so when you sew them into a jacket it's just gonna look like boxy, and it was very, very exhausting. So probably number one on my biggest mistake was trying to attach the lapels to the front of the jacket after the rest of the jacket was built. This idea, this thought process was so bad, it ended, oh, it was so bad. So essentially what happened was I have this entire jacket and I've got these lapels kind of pinned into place, and you can't really use pins because the clothing PVC fabric will show every pinpoint, pleathers, all of that will show every needle hole that you make. So I have all these clips, I'm using like painter's tape to try to keep things in place, and I am feeding it through my machine. But I'm trying to work the whole jacket around versus just a couple of pieces. And needless to say, my machine decided that it was just not gonna do it. It couldn't happen. So it noped and the whole jacket slipped and the needle just went haywire straight through in this line that was like, let me do it like here. Instead of a nice straight line, it was like, like a drunk person trying to take the straight test for a police officer. Yeah, it was a nightmare, and needless to say, looked horrible. Now, to be fair, you could only see it from like the back part. Once the lapels were folded over, you couldn't even tell. But if you know me at all, there was no way I could live with my costume of Riku that I wanted to be perfect with a line like this. So moving on. My second jacket is made. A big waste of supplies. It's great. The lapels I attached to the front pieces, then sewed all of the jacket together, and everything was going so much better. But then came the part on the bottom that is like a black border with the plaid inside, and let me tell you, that wasted more fabric than anything else I had done thus far. So my initial method was to cut one piece that was just the borders and then another piece of the clothing PVC and put the plaid in between and just sew it like a sandwich. It didn't work. It did not work. It was bulky, it was bulging, it was awful. So then I thought, okay, I'll just sew one piece of the back, one piece for the border, and I'll just top stitch down. This also did not work. Because it was just a 1.5 inch border going across, it continued to shift and it wouldn't line up right. And even though I measured 600,000 million thousand times, it still didn't line up right. And this was a disaster for me. Like I made probably at least 10 or 12 different border pieces before I finally found the method that worked. And honestly, it was pretty hilarious because I was using double-sided hem tape and sticking it down and then sticking the border down to it. And I was like, you're gonna stay put and you're gonna go exactly where I want you to go and I'm gonna stitch you down and everything is gonna be fine. Needless to say, the fabric does not have ears. It did not listen to me. It did not obey. But I got there. I mean, eventually I got there. The next step was to attach this piece to the bottom of the jacket. And I had already planned on making a thin strip of black as like a sort of border lining just to give it a little bit more detail, I suppose. But I had to cut the bottom of the jacket shorter because obviously I made it extra long so I could cut it to the length I wanted. And I'm just cutting it around and I'm like la 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 la, and then I come up to the side where the zipper stopper is, and to keep the sides even without paying any attention, I cut that fabric right up against that zipper stopper. I did not give myself room to have, allowance to sew this bottom piece on. So needless to say, I had to go in and hand sew that area, and then the border on top is what attaches it all. So it still looks nice, but these small little things are stacking up to really, really bother me. The hood itself is another issue I had. It's not too big of an issue, but I did have to remake it about 2 or 3 times just to get the sizing right and the way that I wanted it to lay. I did do a muslin mock-up of all of this and everything worked fine in muslin, but when I started putting it into the clothing PVC, everything just wasn't going fine, so I was really sad. Moving on, I now had to line the jacket. Now, to this day, I need to redo that lining so bad. I did not have time. I essentially ran out of time. So I've never cut it that close to a convention before, like to the point where I was styling the wig the night before I was gonna leave. I don't do that. So I did not have time to go in and properly line the jacket. I did cut out lining pieces, sewed them together real quick, and then just hand stitched it into place. So the attachment, my cat is here. So the attachment is not as clean. It's a little bulgy, puckery in some places, but that's an easy fix. Just I don't feel like doing it right now, so yeah. Hello kitty, way to come get in my video like always. But let's move on because there were other pieces to this costume. Now the pants, everything went fine with the pants. I will say that putting the plaid, for anyone who plans to make a Riku themselves, the plaid on the pant legs, if you make it even with the width of the pant leg, it for some reason flares out at the bottoms. And that's really a complicated thing to deal with because with plaid, you want to try to line up the squares, so you want it to just be an even tube. But it's not an even tube, it flares out. I don't know why. So I was able to work it a little bit. I narrowed the bottoms of the pants and I narrowed down the fabric, lined it up, and made that work. So it was a little tricky, but not necessarily like as bad as some of these other instances I've had. The boots themselves were probably the easiest part for me. Putting straps and stuff on boots is essentially just buying some shoe glue and gluing everything down and stabbing in a million pins and letting it dry overnight. So definitely the easiest part. But the gloves were not that easy. Essentially these arm guard things and the gloves are 2 separate pieces because it was just easier to get everything on and off that way. I used the clothing PVC for the initial cuff, and I used the clothing PVC as well as a textured leather pleather for the guards, but for the glove part itself, the clothing PVC has no stretch. So I tried to make some gloves with it, but it wasn't gonna work. Now Riku's gloves are two different tones. So the top is the same kind of leather as everything else, and then the bottom is like a darker black. So I had this darker black knit that I was gonna use here. And then, like I said, the clothing PVC didn't work for the top. But then I remember, I have the Yaya Han fabric, this stretchy black stuff that you can't stitch on top of, but looks like pleather and is stretchy black. That would be perfect for gloves. I suck at gloves, so I did have to make a lot of gloves, but I finally got a pair that I really like. Now, you may be asking, then what's the problem? Well, the problem is, buddy, no, I'm sorry. The problem is that I have worn that costume twice. I have worn those gloves 2 times only, and where it is stitched together, the Yaya Han fabric, the pleather part is literally separating from the bottom stretch fabric. Like, for how much that fabric costs, I am just blown away by its quality, and not in a good way. I mean, it is peeling apart, and it's not like I was doing any kind of crazy work or anything like that. The most I carry is my camera. So for it to be separating from itself is absolutely frustrating, because that means I have to remake the gloves. And I don't want to do that. I wanted it to be a one and done. And it's just never a one and done. Not with me. So 2 more things happened to me while making this costume that broke my soul a little bit. First off, I was ironing the plaid of that bottom strip. You remember the one I told you took forever and cost me yards and yards of fabric because I had to remake it 600 times? Yeah, that one. So I was ironing the plaid very carefully. It's all good, right? No. So I set the iron down and I turned to do something and I hit the iron. It falls over onto the pleather, the clothing PVC. And even though I picked it up super quickly, it burned it. So it's attached, like it's made and it's attached to the costume, and I just don't have the time. And all that time I spent, all the fabric I wasted making it over and over and over again was like, I don't even know, because I burned it. I melted a part of it. So there's a line just going down, like a part of burn, like just burnt. Not the plaid, just the clothing PVC. And it's not, you know, people always tell you, it's like, oh, it's really not that obvious, it's not a big deal. And it's like, yes, but I know that it's there. And that bothers me to no end. And it's still there. I'm honestly, at this point, I'm like, whatever. I'm not redoing it. I am not redoing it. Nobody knows. We'll just call it battle damage. And the last thing, this one's not so bad. This was just, you know, probably a side effect of crunch. So like I said earlier in the video, I did cut it really, really close. I was styling the wig literally the night before we were supposed to leave, and I don't like to rush style wigs. It takes me a long time to style wigs, and I'm not super great at it. So I will style it, cut it, hate it, wash it, style it again until I get it where I'd like it to be. Now, I don't know if I was working too quickly or if I was just being a little too careless, but I do a lot of my feathering work with a razor. A cutting razor, mind you, a hair cutting razor. And to clarify, I don't just go in with a razor because I feel like I know what I'm doing. I actually went to beauty school for 2 years. I am licensed. I know how to cut hair. Even though my hair is always a mess, I do actually know how to cut, style, color, all of that. So I am trained. I can use a razor, but something happened. I don't know if my thumb hit the guard or what, but it pushed the guard up off of the blade a bit, so when I sliced down, the edge of the exposed razor blade just stabbed right into my finger, and not gently, like deep. I was gushing blood, and I guess, I don't know, I didn't really realize I was gushing blood, and my hands are so desensitized to that kind of cut by scissors or cut by, you know, hair cutting razor from the years that I did do hair. So I just wrapped a paper towel around it and put a piece of scotch tape and like continued along. And then when I saw blood like running down my hand, I was kind of like, I guess now I gotta get up and get a band-aid. I did not. I was so pressed for time, I didn't want to get up and get a band-aid. And to clarify, the band-aids are in the closet right outside my room. That is like next level lazy. Next level lazy. I did get a band-aid. Everything was fine. But then at the same time, I'm like, now I'm going to the convention with band-aids on my thumb. But luckily, Riku's gloves are like fingerless but long, so it did hide my band-aids. But yeah, that was just a little cherry on top of my experience building that costume. But yeah, that was essentially Riku. I mean, there was not a single thing about that costume other than, I'd say, the boots that was easy in any way. It was very challenging for me, and I did have to go with the method of good enough for a few things. So there are some things I would like to maybe go back and fix. But I don't really know if I will, honestly. Maybe the lining, but probably that's the only thing I will mess with. Overall though, I think the costume came out really well. It photographs really well. I enjoy being in Riku. I enjoy being dressed as Riku. He is my favorite. And you know, it was worth it, I guess, in the end. We have to just say it was worth it to make all of the pain and suffering, you know, try to make that seem like it wasn't as bad as it was. So we don't go a little crazy, I think. But maybe I think all cosplayers are a little crazy at this point, because why do we keep doing this to ourselves? So yeah, that is the disaster of a story of my Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku build. Let me know down in the comments any big or small mistakes you have made that maybe just destroyed your soul. Just a little bit, because I know we have all been there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.